right, great. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming to the second lecture of the Tableau Public Data Journalism cohort. So we had a great week last week. Lots of things got turned in. The turned out great. Filtering was awesome. I've left comments for almost comments from week one, so make sure to go to the Reddit page, browse through here, and reply or comment back to that I left you. In addition to the content for today's lecture from the syllabus, I also notes when I was going through the assignments, a couple of things that read a few people, and so I'll also be sure to go over those today as well. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. Today we'll be primarily on dashboard actions and parameters. And so dashboard actions actually break down into several different types. So dashboard actions occur on the dashboard. So you have that dashboard. So in this case, we've got three visual sheets. We have our map. We have a timeline here. We have a bar chart, shows just the top 5 countries. Today, we're using a slightly different World Bank data set that shows the number of cell phone subscriptions per 100 people. And this is very similar data set to what quite a few might have seen in our training. So it might be familiar to a lot of you. Okay. So to access dashboard actions and to make this dashboard interactive, so when a reader or viewer starts interacting with it, certain things start to happen to create dashboard actions. Now, there's 3 main types: filtering, highlighting, and all actions. So we took a little bit on filtering using quick filters last time, and that's simply by just having a quick filter come out from visual sheet. So we had this quick filter here, and then we were able to quickly hear what was shown on this particular sheet. Similar to how we have these quick filters, individual sheets act as filters. There's a couple ways to make a sheet act as a filter. They simply go down, select the sheet we want, select drop-down caret, and then use a filter. Now with this, it's a shortcut to creating a dashboard action. Now what happens is when I click for example, on what is that all the other sheets got filtered. So our bar chart got filtered, as did our timeline. In the country, it'll filter to that particular country. But I don't particularly like that kind of filtering. I want to be able to see all the other countries in the particular region and then be able to focus on that particular country while still having the context of countries. I can go out to doing that. So one way is obviously the filtering. By the filter, what happened was it's saying each of these marks will now act as a filter. And be down to the country, it's filtering all the way down to the country. And earlier, by using this drop down, it's really a shortcut to dashboard actions. Now to add and be able to modify and customize those dashboard actions, we'll want to come up here to dashboard and dashboard actions. We see we have our very first dashboard here, which is this filter 1, and then these we have generated, and that's because it was generated with that quick shortcut of simply clicking the sheet and making it a filter. If I click on it and select edit, we'll get a filter pane here. This is where we can customize the filter and select which sheets filter which other sheets. Are we going to place limitations on what fields will filter what fields and things like that? So let's go ahead and do a quick rundown here of all the possibilities. So top of your filter, what you'll see are source sheets. This is where you select which sheet you want to act as the filter. Because the map and has that uses filter from the drop down, this is being selected here. If I added bar, okay, clicked OK. Now when I click on the bar also act as filter. That's how we could do that. But if I click on the timeline, nothing happens. But if actions and add timeline as a source for my filter, now click on the timeline. Now the filtering will happen. So for inputting, you'll have to choose which sheets will act as a filter. You want to stick with map. And so have your target sheets. So which sheets do we want to be filtered by a particular sheet that we chose up here? In this case, I want my map to filter my bar chart in my timeline, and I don't really want it to affect my map. So I select map. Now, OK. Select map. What it is, it doesn't fit the map. That doesn't just go down to one point. It shows all the other points. The bar chart as well as the timeline are still being filtered. We'll go back to dashboard actions and other changes. Sheet we want to act as a filter, what we want it to filter. On the right side, we have a couple more customizations. This run action on, what this does is it controls how the filter will be activated. So select is the default action. So when you click on something, so if there's a click, then the filter becomes activated. The others are hover. So if we do click OK, now hover over the marks. I'm looking here, I'm just hovering over them. This is useful. How many marks? And there's that it's a little disorienting. So we probably want this to act on a hover. We want it to be on a select. Now the other option is menu. If we select menu, this new option is added to all the tooltips. With that filter, you just on that little, and it'll execute the action for you. It'll execute the filtering. Modify the name on the particular of this particular filter. You're renaming the filter up here. So we could do something else. We could call this filter by. Let's call it filter by region. I think that's what we'll end up going by. Okay. So one time, now we named it. Now it says filter by region. We click on that, and it'll filter. Now, one tiny little checkbox underneath it called Run on Single Select Only. This is actually powerful and really helpful, and I want to make sure I show everyone. I'll go Select, and I'll leave that unchecked. And what by default is you can actually select multiple points by clicking and dragging. You get some lots of different points, or for example, by holding Control, you could pick different points in different areas. What the select only does is disables that. So you drag a really big box around it, it won't work. The filter will stop working. It only works if you select mark. This is, you might modify your dashboard where there's enough space to show multiple points. For example, if someone were to select 100 countries like this, it might not fit correctly on your dashboard. So by selecting the Run on Single Select, you'll be able to limit filtering by one area. Okay. Here, disable this. On the sheets, clearing selection will. We've got three options here. Show all values. So what happens here is when I click on 3 and click on, it'll all the values. So the filter turns on, and then I deselect, the filter turns off. Now the other filter, so do that. Next is when I click on a country and I select it, that just stays there. So the filter's on, and then it stays on until I click on a different country. And option exclude all values. So if I select that, if I click on a country, it shows it, and when I deselect it, everything goes away. So the fit's turned on, and other gets turned off. So it doesn't even display the filter. So different ways that you can combine these different filter types, do certain things on different sheets. In this case is we've got one sheet filtering two sheets, but we could have a hover action happen on the bar chart, and we could then create a separate filter that would timeline, and then we could customize the type and also what the clearing the selection will do to different sheets. Again, so you could create one filter that would just work from map to the bar, and it could create a filter that then work from the map to the timeline that have slightly different functions. So that you would customize how filters work on different sheets. Okay, our map, filtering the bar and the timeline, we'll go by the default click, and we'll have it show all values, but leave the filter. So what'll happen is when you click on something, it'll leave that filter. Now the section here is the target filters. What happens when we look at these marks are actually composed of several things. When we hover over, we see that we've got the country name, but a little bit more categorical information about this particular mark. We know what region that particular mark is from. So it's in North Africa. We also have our measurement that shows the number of cell phone subscriptions. If you click on a particular mark, it's taking into consideration the country name, but also the country region, and that's why it's filtering most granularly. It's going down to the very basics, which is to each country. But we can work. So if I go back to my filter and I selected fields, I say, instead of filtering all the way down to country, just filter down to the region. So add filter, and then I selected I just want it to filter down to the region. So let me take consideration the region, click OK, OK. When I click on a particular mark, what you'll see is that instead to that one particular country, what's happened actually filtering to all countries in that particular region. So what's happening is it's taking into consideration, it's ignoring the country name, and it's saying, well, you clicked on something that's Latin American, Caribbean, and just show all the things in Latin America and Caribbean, or in Sub-Saharan Africa, or in East Asian Pacific. So way that you can model how the filters act in this case. So what's happening here is instead of a user on a particular country they want to see, there's all these red marks, or these orange marks, or these blue marks. And then just to that, and then maybe we want them to then click on one of these bar charts to do something else. Well, if we make this bar chart also a filter, and the will filter that. And the thing here is it's overriding it. This particular bar chart filter is overriding the other filter, and so it's definitely not something that we want in our use case here. So let me go ahead and turn that back off. The sense is instead of filtering, it would be nice to do some highlighting. Highlighting is another type of dashboard action. And there's a couple ways that you can turn on highlighting. So default color legends act as a highlighter. When you select one, it'll actually highlight the most correspond to that particular color. So if I select Europe and Central Asia, it highlights all the countries in Europe and Central Asia. When I select East Asian specific, it's not only highlighting the marks on the map, but also the bar chart in the timeline, because the bar chart and the timeline are filtered to that. And what it's highlighting because of this little highlighter pen. We can do the highlighting from the color legend by clicking on it. So the highlight's turned off. The highlighting will be turned back on. Now another is by going to this highlighter pen. How we want the highlighting to occur. Because we have by region, it's on the region highlight, but we could do that and instead say by country name. So in a particular country, yeah, for us. So now is we're combining the filter. So the filter is set up when we click a particular country in a region, it will filter to that region, and then it'll actually highlight that particular country that we clicked on. So if we brush to Europe and Asia, and we're highlighting just the Russian mark, or we can green or some of these other countries. Right one, it'll also the bar chart here. Since we're doing the top 5, these don't fit. Let me go ahead and click on. There we go. So we filtered to specific, and we're highlighting Australia. Since Australia is on the bar chart, highlights it there and highlights the mark for us to combine the interactivity. Now, typically, I'd like to allow the user to be able to zoom in on a particular region so that they can find their country a lot easier. Now, now have this zoom option here, so you can click the plus and it'll zoom for you. If you can hold, you usually drag the maps around, or you drag box and on a region, selecting a box like that. And then if you want to go back out, you just click on this little pen and it'll undo the map and show all marks. But users to have to zoom in on the region that they're looking for. I think a lot more effective to maybe just have a filter that allows them to select the region they're interested in. So region filter. And we'll do we'll drop down. Actually, single value drop down, so that we'll just go to one particular region. And what's in here is because particular region filter came out of the map, it's only affecting the map for now. So we'll drop down and select worksheets. I'll use data source. And since sheets are using the same data source, this filter will not apply to all of them. What this is if I pick a slightly different region, the proper region, but the other one's defilter. And what's happening here is we're actually ending up cascading the filter we have that we've created by clicking on the marks that filters these sheets. Now also have this region filter here that that filters the marks. And so what's happening is that clicker from the map is bringing out region, and so when we switch regions, that other region doesn't exist. So we click on it. So make sure is that we go back up to our dashboard actions. Adjust so that the region filter does the region filtering. Do is that we no longer need to have the map act as the region filter. So we can go ahead and click OK. A different one, the region filtering, but then on here we still have our highlight, which is as we created it by clicking on the highlight pen. Highlight individual marks we're interested in viewing. Now, by the filter, we can also modify the highlight by selecting it, clicking it, and the same features here. We can have the work on a hover or on a menu, and select which things highlight, which sheets highlight which other sheets. So search fields. Yeah, so in this case, we're highlighting by country name, but we could do something by region as well. Options here as well. And one of going through here, what's happening with this particular region filter is it's filtering out our map. It also ends up in our color legend here. And because in this case, I don't think it makes sense to show the more. So I'll go ahead and close that guy out. And then I'll select my region. And now bottom left here. So now filter real estate here so we can see it a lot. Good use of space. Now, the dashboard action is the URL action. And actions allow you to do is add control. So you add a video or a web page within your visualization. So we'll go make a web page here from our dashboard content. That's it on the far right here. Web page. And us to have a page for a particular country show up, or maybe you want an image for a particular country or flag for a particular country to show up. So we use this web page here to update according to which marks we click on. So when clicking is happening as of right now, the word actions that we can add is called the URL action. We usually select which URL this. Now, with actions, you can have URL. So, for example, we could say we want it to go to the world www.worldbank.com, and then we can send a name, call it World Bank. We'll leave it on. Click OK. When we hover over these marks, we have this little hyperlink called World Bank. When we click that, this browser shows the World Bank for us. Yeah, there it goes. So load a bank for us. But we don't need what page to be loaded when we click on different marks. Maybe we want it to go to a specific country. The dashboard actions, URL action. We can dynamic fields. So notice we're building your dashboard that some of the titles are changing as you were adjusting filters. It's because the field that was being changed when you were adjusting those filters. So what fields are fields that will change depending upon what mark type you're looking at. So instead of having the name be a static name, which we typed in, we can actually have it be a dynamic name. Select the carrier, and I select country name. We can dynamic field because it has these greater than and less than signs on each end. So when I go OK, now we're over a different. We'll set that particular country is named as the link title. And similar thing down here in the URL. So it's a little arrow, and we can add a dynamic field here. So we have is instead of using the World Bank, we'll go ahead and use Google. And there's a parameter that Google has in its URL where we can actually search for something automatically without having to type it in. So search equals, and I think the query and then we select country. What will happen is when we click a link, it will go to google.com /# equals, and then it'll fill in the name of the country where the country name dynamic field is. So when we click OK, OK. Now when we go on Egypt, select, we went to and Google automatically fills in that country's name in the search box for us. There we go. So on and so forth. Able to modify and the highlights. We could change this to a select. So if we select, there won't highlight the hyperlink button. The action will act instantly just by clicking on the mark. And there's other things you can do here. You can encode data values. You can add multiple fields at a time, and things of that nature. We won't do any of that in our class, but if you do have questions regarding that, please feel free to let me know or ask on Reddit, and I can help you with those as well. Okay, in here, let's make it a menu. And here is our little link showing up in the tooltip. And in this case, because we embedded a web page within the dashboard, that URL is affecting this particular web. But over here, and we actually close this, so now I have any web dashboard, and now select a particular tree and the hyperlink. Tableau, hey, it's out and follow hyperlink. What you'll see is that Tableau from within the dashboard will actually go out and go to your default web browser and search for that. So ways you can combine this dashboard to actually make your dashboard a searchable database or an exploratory tool for your website. So way of dashboard actions is to use one of the fields that's included with it. So in this case, we use the country name, but it could just easily be an additional field within Excel spreadsheet. So what you could is in your Excel spreadsheet, you could have a whole nother field called URL. And when example goes to Aruba, you could have it go to www.aruba.com/center and so on and so forth. So it could go to a completely different page. These lines here. The different countries could have different links, different years could have different links, so on and so forth. And then what you would do is you simply have that URL field with your dimensions here. And now it's the word action. You could then connect to that particular URL field that you have in your Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so dashboard actions, how to do filtering, lighting, and URL actions. There's one last thing I want to touch base on when it comes to filtering, which we briefly covered earlier, which was compound filtering. So what we had earlier was we had one filter that's filtering, and then we had another filter that was filtering on top of that. Let's go ahead and add another filter to this particular sheet here. In addition to having regions, we also have income groups. So I'll add income group. Let's add income group to change these from automatic to shape. Income group on shape. And so now what's happening is Tableau is assigning a different shape to different countries depending upon what income group they're in. Using these default, I'll use the fill ones so that they stand out a little bit better. Okay, there we go. And my filter here. A little bit of formatting. I will do a multiple value drop down, and then I'm floating next to my region filter. So now what you see is we have two separate filters. We have a region filter, so we can pick a different region, and then we have our scope group filter. North America, you'll see we only have two different types of groups. So let me bring out a shape legend here so we can see what we have. Okay. In this case, for North America, we have a high income group, high income groups, non-OECD and OECD. But if we go to the income filter, we still see that we are just the other filter types. Theoretically, someone could come in here and say, I don't want to see this or this, and then the screen. Now, again, we've got our region filter, and then on top of that, we're doing this other filter. These compound filters, to have them in order. So, for example, if someone goes to a particular region and then we one or different income groups, we should only just be displaying those one or two income groups. Now, we can say how Tableau prioritizes the relevant figures. So when one of these filters, you'll see in this upper right-hand corner, there's a little box that shows these three over it says show fewer values. If we click on that and the drop down, what you'll see is that now Tableau is just showing you just the fewer values that are being pre-filtered by the region. With a different region, you'll see that now we have more income groups. And if we go to Europe, I guess Africa is the only one that has that doesn't come, not OECD countries. And then if we go to North America, there are two. So you can click on the show fewer or more button, limit what's being displayed. And that's just a shortcut there. If we go to the drop down here, you can also list that right here. That's only relevant values. So I'm having this selected to show fewer. Now, this workbook, this little icon will be showing up here, and it's possible for one of our viewers to accidentally click on it and get into a situation that they don't necessarily want to be in. So we can customize these filters, selecting the drop down, and then under the customize option, the show more your button. And so now the little button will be disabled and then viewers can't change it. As well, you have the option to remove the all value. So Tableau will add this all value, which of the region we don't necessarily want because this is very difficult for someone to view. So we can go down to the drop down, select customize, disable show all value. And so the viewer, the reader, will only be able to pick one particular region and won't be able to pick the all. And we could do this here. And this, I think it makes sense. Maybe somebody wants to be able to see all of them. So there we go. Okay, compound filters. So make filter another filter, limit what the filter can see. So with that up, the filtering component of this session is actually to cover parameters. So I'll give a couple minutes for anyone that's attending the session to type in any questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to, again, type them into the Q&A or that box, and they'll be at the top of your screen. So it'll take a couple seconds for you to do that. Okay, any questions? So I'll just keep going on. As watching this video, as you're watching the recording, please feel free to the Reddit for week 2 to ask your questions. Covered filters, and filters are a way for someone to be able to remove data from what's being displayed, right? So instead of viewing all the data, able to just see a subset of the data, and you want to see an even smaller subset of the data. Do that again by using the filters. If you were to interact with what's being displayed, is by using what are called parameters. Parameters can be created in Tableau. They're not created in the spreadsheet. They're created in Tableau. And we'll go ahead and we'll go and create a new sheet here, and we'll go ahead and create a parameter. But I need what the parameter does. Let me build something up pretty quickly here. Let's do year and set timeline again. And we'll do okay. And go ahead and build a parameter. By default, you can't see any parameters in your dims and measures. To create a parameter, you actually have to know you want one. And to do it, you just right-click within any of the empty space and so to create parameter. Come up with a box, and then you can select what kind of parameter you want to create. Now, parameter is a way for a viewer to actually add information into Tableau without touching the underlying spreadsheet. In a spreadsheet, we can have text fields, which are strings. You can also have numbers with decimal point, integers, so whole numbers. You have boolean, so true or false, and you can have dates and time. Okay, so let's just go ahead and pick an integer, so whole numbers. We can set what the value will be, so we'll make it 1, and modify how it'll be displayed. And then a couple options here on choose what values are allowable. So all will allow a person to type in a whole number. A limit allows you to limit what value you want someone to be able to type in. So say we just want them to type in 1 or 2 or 3. And then we can, instead of 1 standing for 1, it could be something like small, medium. So click OK. We'll see we have this parameter that's been created here. If I click, I can show parameter control. And now it's parameter here. And within that parameter, we have the 3 display options, small, medium, and large. And what happens is when the parameter changes to that particular number. So I take my parameter here, put it right next to my rows, and what you'll see is when I select a different value, the parameter actually changes, right? So in small, it's 1, medium is 2, and large is 3. So it isn't really doing much. Only way I'm able to actually see an effect of that parameter is by taking that parameter and dragging it out, dragging it in my display. Now let's go ahead or actually select the parameter, do edit parameter. The option is to select a range and say I just want to be able to select from 1 to 10. And then I wanted in steps of 2 maybe, and click OK. And see that the parameter changed. So instead of being ahead with the text or the list, it's now lighter. And then in all is box where you can type in any value you want. We now have a way for a user to input a value value now shows up as a field, we can now have this particular field or this particular parameter interact with the rest of our dashboard. This is as simple as what we did, so just dragging that parameter out. It be used for a reference line. So we'll go and take the parameter off, and to add a reference line, particular chart here that just draws a line across here. Click on my average cell phones axis, add ref line. I can see I want the reference line to be per 1. Click OK. And here, let me format it and make it red. And dot. So, well, the goal for world everybody to have one cell phone. So say that's our goal. So calling this parameter 1, we could say phone goal. Anyway, well, maybe the goal is to actually decrease cell phone usage. So we could say 50, and now the reference line go to 50. So it's just one way of impacting visualization appears. Now it can actually use is a calculated field. Many of you are familiar with Excel. You can write formulas together, multiplying things, writing if statements and things of that nature. You can do anything in Tableau. So how we created a parameter, you just right-click in some empty space here in dimensions and measures. Choose its field. And text box where you can type in your formula. So say something along the name of, or lines of, I want, and call it lots of phones, and get a phone's number, and to multiply it, and go. Click OK. New field here, cell phones. It's based on cell phones and it's based on cell phone goal. We know calculate field because it has this little equals to it. And there's lots of cell phones and average cell phones here. Go back into average. So you have average lots of cell phones. And what you'll see is if you modify this particular parameter, let's say 2, what's happening are changing here. So you make this 100. Now it's 10. And lock this axis. Start at 0 and go to 1,000. Is if I decrease my parameter to 9, smaller. It's going to 8. It's going, and that's because what's happening is I'm changing how by my parameter I'm changing the multiplier by which the cell phones are being multiplied. So I'm going so on and so forth. And now take out my cell phones, put them up here. Do a quick synchronize the axes. You could have the actual number of cell phones, and then you could have this modified one and say, well, I predict cell phone growth to be 4 times. And then you can see how that compares to the actual cell phone, actual number of cell phones. There's lots of that you can modify a parameter to allow your user to input information into the visualization. Exactly like we have here, you could actually use parameters with case statements or when statements to trigger and further manipulate your view. Filtering is a quite advanced topic, and so what we'll do is we'll actually touch on that maybe towards the end of the class sessions. Rolling out a pretty complex dashboard or visualization, and I think that regular filters might not work for you, let me know or ask the question, and then I can walk you through how to use a parameter as a filter. So we've on the dashboard actions, we've touched on parameters. There's quite a bit of information. I do want to make sure we have about 10, 15 minutes. I want to make sure that this sure isn't as long as the last one. But I do want to make sure that I cover some of the questions that people had from last week's assignment. So let's see here. Next thing people were asking about was the page shelf. The timeline here. So the page shelf is very similar to the filter shelf in that what really is happening is you're filtering information from a particular year. Put year on pages and cycle through. You can see the dot moves and the information from that particular year, right? Now you can put it on filter, then years, and let's go ahead and close this parameter and change the quick filter to a slider. Bring it over. Now what we're seeing is 1 point. The 1 point, but the way Tableau is displaying is it's saying I don't want to show anything but the date for 1987. So having the year on pages, and what's Tableau saying, draw what each of the years looks like. So we have 65 through 2011. So we've got lots of points here, but don't change anything about it. Just draw where that point would be, and on what page you want to show, you're just going to show that little flip of the book. So that's why I like to think of pages as a flip book. If you've ever seen one of those tiny little booklets that has a slightly different picture on each page, and you thumb through it real quickly, and it switches from each, and the picture slightly changes as you go through. So that way pages is. The general context is all there, but displayed is going to change depending upon which page you're viewing. As opposed to filter, which shows the information for one particular point. Really, probably about 99% of any visualization you see will use filters or something else. I extremely rarely ever see anybody just. So if in doubt, follow filters. Sure, I did mention there were a couple things about the page. So if we put year on pages, we could enable 3, and you should just show the last 5 marks, and then through. And let's see, all. Let's see, we want to be able to add the trails. Let's see, we're not showing. So on trails, so now as we go through, what it is, we get this line that's being drawn here, with first mark being shown. And we get, well, just show the last 5, so that's kind of a trailing snake, right? Cool little things you can do with the pages shelf. Starting up, I would highly recommend just sticking with filters for now. Okay, so we've covered pages. Our own option, but for the most part, we use filters. Another pitfall I saw common was filters and selecting where they're applied to. So let me do into here and drag out. I have a filter. Okay, your filter, I'll make it a slider. So what it does is it shows the number of cell phone subscriptions for one particular. Make this small map. And I also want this to apply to the rest of the sheets. So let's go ahead and see what happens. If I go to top down and say I want everything on here to just display data from one particular year, apply it all using this data source, and we run into a slight preview. So it's this filter. What's happening is it's filtering the map and it's filtering the bar chart to a particular year, but it's also filtering our timeline to just show the values for 2008. Not helpful, but that we can actually take this a step further and on drop down, apply to worksheets and selecting only worksheet, which would just be the map, or all use data source. We can have it go and certain worksheets. So if we selected worksheets, now say, well, on the map, it has to be because that's the default, and then work on the bar chart, but don't work on the timeline. So I deselected the timeline, click OK. And so now is the filter here will work in the bar chart, but it'll leave a timeline completely alone. Again, that's the drop down here, up sheets, and all using this data source. Particular sheets you want to be affected by the filter, or just the original sheet that you brought the quick filter up from. I think only this worksheet. The thing was compound filtering, which we covered. Sorting. Go ahead and build out a quick table here. We'll go ahead and take our names, say what region they're in, group they're in, and then we'll phones, place those on text here. Now we'll show the number of cell phones. And maybe let's go ahead and take our cell phones and also put them on columns so we have all our bars here. And they're nice. Now, this view is interesting. We can quickly be able to drill down and find a particular country because it's all alphabetical. But we wanted to sort our data into descending or ascending order. There's so different things you can do. It's all going to be called sorting. Different ways you can go about it. So we hover over at the top of charts here. You can see the icon comes up, showing descending bars with a down arrow. Now, click on that. That's all our country names are now sorted in order. If we click on it again, now it's in descending order. And now if we click on it, so it'll cycle in descending order, ascending order, and just back to alphabetical. Now we can modify the sorting is selecting the field that we want to sort. So select country name. And now, similar to other features in Tableau, lots and lots of different options here. We can choose descending, ascending. We can choose which field to sort it by. So because we have cell phones out, when we did the order, it automatically did it by cell phone. But we could also do it by a different field that isn't necessarily displayed on our dashboard here. We could say, well, I want to sort it by income group. And click OK. The income group for a particular region. Or you could click on region and say, I want everything to be sorted by region or income group or so on and so forth. To clear the sorting, click on the field, clear sort, click, and clear the sort as well. Click on region. Region, let's see here. Region. Okay, there. Now doing by region, but for reason it's not all alphabetical. Interesting. It can get a little bit tricky because we now have 3 different fields we can try. Let me show if you wanted to filter if you wanted to make everything be sorted by region first, you could take region, put in front, and now so we could see East Asia and Pacific is first, all the countries in East Asia and Pacific, country name in alphabetical order, followed by income group, Europe and Central Asia, and so on and so forth. But maybe we want to actually go back and have them shown for each of the countries. What you could do in this case is take region out again, put it in front of the country name, and now have the sorting by this region here, and then use the region label here. Part of this is actually to hide this column here. Now, to column, what we want to do is called hide header. So if we select this first column, which is our region, and select show header, it'll actually hide that column. And what you're seeing is all the country names by region. All right. What I wanted to go over with filtering. So sometimes what you'll see when you're building out a dashboard is you have what are called fields. So let's see what the easiest way to approximate this would be. Let me just build a map here. Now all my regions. Okay. So in our sheet is very common. We have all of our values, but at the very, very bottom, there might be, depending on the spreadsheet, you might have some spaces or just some raw data doesn't belong there. You know that the version isn't that's not going to be displayed because it's incomplete. But what we'll say is that, or what Excel will say is that at some point there's something in there. So there was something in there, but now it's not there. So it'll come up with is it'll come and say it's null. So when you would in this region filter, you would have something in parentheses that says null. If you remove that, you can do your Excel spreadsheet and try to clear all the cells and remove all the null values. But there's a trick that you could do, and this is using the compound filter, is take your region here, duplicate it, it'll be copy, and actually slot it in above your other region, and then you'll be able to select just you want to display. Okay, in this case, that we want to display everything but East Asia and Pacific, or just we want to display everything but Europe and Central Asia. And now we go to our regular region, the non-copy version. We'll go back fewer values. And what was that? Europe and Central Asia is being removed. Because what's happening is we're taking the same field, we're copying it, and linking it in one second here. We're saying, you know what, I'll show a subset. And now when the filter that we expose to the viewers will now just show that particular subset of data. And again, because we're compounding the filters on top of each other. And that's, again, using the show more values or only relevant values field. So the most common using filtering and duplicating a particular field is because you have null fields. But you can have different cases here. And then I had a couple also on dashboards. When you're running dashboards, there are two ways that you can go about designing dashboards. Before Tableau 8.0, all the content on a dashboard had to be tiled. So think of tiled as that every content on the dashboard has to fill up the space on the dashboard. So if I bring out map, or if I report here, bring out map, what you set, it tiles it and fills up the entire space. If I want to put in some blank, I actually have to take a blank spot here and put it at the bottom, and then it will fill up a little bit of it. Tiled, right? And now if I take my bar chart, it's going to fill up all the even here, right? We can set this bar chart component taking up all the space. Start one added floating content, and so what float does is it actually allows you to make a piece of content floating, and so down, and it doesn't necessarily have to take up all the space. And we could do the same thing with the map. You can make it floating, and what happens at this point is if we hide everything, you could theoretically have a completely blank background with just floating content on it. Cool, and people familiar with doing this, you know, in Microsoft Word when you're building a chart, or if you're using Photoshop and you're building things, you have a blank canvas and then you bring things on top of it and you can rearrange them. The key part is if you make everything floating, it won't necessarily always be aligned. It'd be slower on Tableau server, and it won't always necessarily show up exactly how you had it displayed on the desktop. So build it here like this, have things arranged in a certain way, and then when you save it to Tableau Public, it might be a couple pixels off one way or another. That's when I typically build dashboards. I'll start everything with tiled, so I'll have everything tiled, and then I might float one or two slight pieces of content. So kind of earlier, I had my quick filter for region floating because it's to not have it take up all that space. You do bring out a filter, it takes up and creates all this white space here because it's considered tiled, right? It's creating this tile on the right-hand side, slot into this tile in this vertical orientation and create all this white space. And we got it in above, and same thing would happen. It would try to take up all the space from the side. Now, when you're building out the charts and sheets, let's say we had multiple bar charts and different numbers of components on them. If there's 5 components like we see here, we're going to end up with all this white space here. But let's say, for example, we want it to fill up all the white space here. We go to drop-down caret, select, and view. We'll now resize the visualization to take in all available space. Now, this is helpful if you're building visualization, bar charts, and they're not extending all the way to the end. For example, you can just have them fit to the width, or you get them to the height. There's lots of different modifications. But definitely, you're building a dashboard, considering this fit option here, and to fit all your content to the entire view. Things, if you do want to move sheets, so by default, if you start out with a blank dashboard, we'll click on something, it'll add it for you. Want to move or rearrange these things. To do that, you'll select item, that'll border around it, and at the center of the gray border at the top here, you have all the little dots. Now there's a little gripper. You'll see the mouse cursor changes. When you're over that, it changes to this little move icon, and click on that, and then you can drag it around. Click on it and hold it, and drag it around to exactly where you want it to be. We're in this tiled configuration. Tableau to tile it. So if we drag it to the left, it's going to get half of the available space here. If we drag it to the top, it's going to get half the available space. And then if we want to resize it, select the sheet you want to resize, and then just drag the edges to where you want them to go. Okay, couple of others. I noticed quite a few have had maps with Alaska, Hawaii in them. Now, it's when you, especially the United States with Alaska and Hawaii, it can be so much space and how your entire dashboard looks. So what we typically do is we'll zoom in and pick on the continental United States. So you'll map pin like this. And we know because this little blue pin comes up here. And what it means is the map will not move or it will not adjust or will not react to filters. It's going to just display this. And Alaska and Hawaii will go. And then I'll Alaska, and then I'll duplicate the map again. Hawaii. And I'll Hawaii, unpin it. And then I need to find Hawaii here. Let's see, there it is. And on just Hawaii. And same thing for Alaska. I'll unpin it and then zoom in just on Alaska. And that is what we've done is we've pinned the map to Alaska and Hawaii. On our dashboard, we can take Hawaii and add it. And we can add Alaska and add that as well. And so now we can display of the continental U.S. and we can work displays of Alaska and Hawaii. Making these floating, you can actually tile them, or you can actually put them within the map here. So we'll make this floating as well. Decrease. And here, and Alaska here. Drag this map over a little bit. A lot of things you could do with the dashboard to get things just right. And then the thing is to just right click on the titles, and then left with is an map of Alaska and Hawaii, and you still have a lot more room for continental United States. The final thing I like to do on these tiny little maps is right click and they hide zoom control. So instead of going over here and having someone unclick the pin, the map gets by hide zoom control, nets are locked and nobody can actually go in and zoom them or modify them in any way. You can still double click and drag. But that's less likely than accidentally clicking the pin or the zoom or anything like that. Last thing, and then we'll be done. And dynamic fields for titles, for sheets, and so on and so forth. So let me go back to this particular here. And filter. To pick to a particular region, we'll make this apply to all the sheets. Helpful if there was some sort of designator on here that would say, you know, I've did North or Middle East and North Africa. I want to make sure that I'm on Middle East and North Africa. So with like earlier, we used dynamic fields for URL parameters. We can also do the same thing for titles. I'll go ahead and add the title back to my map here. Click on it. And drag my little text box here. So in this text editor, we can see there's this dynamic field called name. The name corresponds to the name of that particular sheet. So in this case, we called it map. That's why it's called map. If we rename the sheet to something else, it would rename it. But we're going to pick a different dynamic field for this. To enter a new dynamic field, just go up to Insert, and then use dynamic fields here. In this case, I want to show the region. Click OK, and see that the title is going to update according to what filter we're using. So for Europe and Central Asia, now it says Europe and Central Asia, North America, and we do the same thing for sheet there. Double click, region. We can, and say Europe and Central Asia in year 1. And so now when we adjust this filter, we'll actually say what year this is for. So a lot of ways you can combine dynamic fields